Hello, all you freedom-loving people. The FBI arrested a suspect in the pipe bombing investigation. Mike Lindell is contemplating running against Tim Walz for Minnesota governor. And what is really happening between the United States and Venezuela? Okay, let's get into it. Today, FBI agents arrested an individual as part of the years-long investigation into the pipe bombs that were placed in the District of Columbia on January 5th, 2021. The suspect was arrested in Virginia, and he was taken into custody. The man in custody is 30-year-old Brian Cole Jr. of Woodbridge. The FBI also carried items out of his home in Virginia, and they searched a vehicle outside the residence.
Early this morning, Brian Cole Jr. was arrested and charged with placing the pipe bombs at the RNC and the DNC on January 5th, 2021. He has been charged with violating 18 U.S.C. 844, which is use of an explosive device. This investigation is ongoing. As we speak, search warrants are being executed, and there could be more charges to come. I'm going to let our U.S. Attorney discuss that shortly. This was the work of multiple agencies working together. This morning's operation was carried out safely and successfully.
According to the complaint against the suspect, the FBI was able to determine at exactly which stores on exact dates each part of the pipe bombs were purchased by the suspect. Based on the complaint, each purchase was made over the course of years. On January 5th, 2021, one pipe bomb was placed outside the Democratic National Committee office, and another bomb was left that same day outside the Republican National Committee headquarters. But neither of the bombs went off since law enforcement officers found them the following day. Surveillance footage showed a person wearing a gray hoodie, Nike Air Max Speed Turf sneakers, a mask, glasses, and gloves, but no arrests had been made in the investigation for nearly 5 years. Back in May, FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino wrote on X that shortly after being sworn in, he and FBI Director Kash Patel reviewed several high-profile public corruption cases and decided to reopen some of them or assign more resources. And the D.C. pipe bombing case was among those cases. Then, back in October, the FBI released new footage and reiterated the $500,000 reward for information about the person who placed the bombs.
As the Attorney General said, we did not discover any new information. What we did, an investigation spearheaded by the Deputy Director and the ADIC of our Washington field office, brought in a new team of investigators and experts, re-examined every piece of evidence, sifted through all the data, something that the prior administration refused and failed to do. As a result of that, we generated numerous investigative leads, executed multiple legal process with our U.S. attorney partners, and came to this conclusion today. And that is why we were able to safely secure this individual into custody.
At the press conference today, when asked what moment confirmed that they had identified the suspect, Dan Bongino said that the breakthrough came from forensic evidence.
We're in the prologue of a long book. This is just the beginning. This is not the end of the investigation, as you all well know, having reported on these for a long time. There's interviews to be conducted. The search warrant processing scene is not even done. So we're at the early stages, so that's the only reason I hesitate to tell you what the exact tip was. But yes, that was absolutely the moment, and it was due to the diligent and incredible work of a team in the Washington field office that came in and just scoured through this over and over and over and over again.
In general, was it forensic? Was it a phone call? Was it something about a vehicle?
We'll just leave it generally forensic evidence.
And Attorney General Pam Bondi joked that the announcement was basically the perfect birthday gift for Deputy Bongino.
Radar before.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you all. And one more thing, this is the best birthday present I think Deputy Director Bongino could ask for today.
How is it different?
Happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Thank you.
How is it different now than the other?
The renowned MyPillow Mike Lindell has filed paperwork to run for Minnesota governor as a Republican candidate in 2026, but he's not yet formally announced his candidacy. However, he stated that there's a 98% chance he will run. He plans to make a formal announcement at his Minnesota pillow factory on December 11th. If he runs, his opponent could be incumbent governor and former Democratic vice presidential candidate Tim Walz. Mike Lindell was once an ordinary, successful businessman. He is best known for his pillow brand, My Pillow. But 5 years ago, the presidential race swept him into the most intense political vortex. He is a staunch supporter of President Trump. He has been actively involved in challenging the election results since late 2020. After Biden entered the White House in 2021, Lindell not only didn't cease his efforts, but intensified his efforts. He employed various methods to prove that large-scale fraud occurred in the 2020 election that year, and as a result, mainstream media labeled him a conspiracy theorist. Mainstream media and social platforms had censored his voice. Then, he even launched his own media company. His actions have also landed him in legal trouble on multiple occasions, but he has claimed that voting machines flipped millions of votes from then-President Trump to Joe Biden. Now, he is facing defamation lawsuits from Dominion Voting Systems and Smartmatic, two of the voting technology companies that he accused of manipulating the 2020 outcome. A federal judge recently ruled that he defamed Smartmatic, but a jury will decide potential damages. Earlier this year, a federal jury found Lindell liable for defaming a former Dominion executive and ordered Lindell to pay about $2.3 million in damages. Despite these legal troubles, Lindell did not back down. In 2021, Lindell bankrolled a cyber symposium in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. During the event, he launched a challenge called Prove Mike Wrong. Lindell offered a $5 million reward to anyone who could prove data uncovered by Lindell wasn't election interference. This challenge also led to a lawsuit. The judges of the Prove Mike Wrong challenge did not announce a winner, but Las Vegas engineer Robert Zeidman claimed victory and requested arbitration under the competition rules. An arbitration panel later determined that Zeidman should receive the $5 million prize. After the case was brought to court, a U.S. district judge ruled last year to uphold the arbitration panel's decision and ordered Lindell to pay compensation. So Lindell subsequently filed an appeal, and the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit overturned the federal district court judge's ruling in July of this year, finding that the arbitration panel had misinterpreted the rules of the challenge that were established and overseen by Lindell. Consequently, Lindell is not required to pay Zeidman the $5 million. If Lindell chooses to run, Lindell will face a crowded GOP primary with Minnesota State Representative Kristen Robbins and Scott Jensen, a former challenger who lost to sitting Democratic Governor Tim Walz in 2022. Lindell said that he hasn't considered whether the competition was fierce. He said, "If I run, it's going to be because I want to save my state and I believe I'd be the best qualified of anyone to do it. I've lived in Minnesota my whole life, born and raised there, and what's going on with the fraud and with our governor is shameful." President Trump announced on Wednesday a full and unconditional pardon for Texas Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar and his wife Imelda. The Cuellars had been charged with bribery and money laundering, while Cuellar has denied the allegations. President Trump stated that they were prosecuted as retaliation for speaking the truth. In his post on Truth Social, President Trump accused President Biden. He wrote that Biden used the FBI and DOJ to take out a member of his own party after highly respected Congressman Henry Cuellar bravely spoke out against open borders and the Biden border catastrophe. In January of 2024, Cuellar urged Biden to end the catch-and-release policy targeting undocumented immigrants. This policy has led to millions of illegal immigrants flooding into the United States. President Trump said that not only did Cuellar face retaliation, but his wife was also implicated, all simply because they spoke the truth. President Trump announced, "Because of these facts and others, I am hereby announcing my full and unconditional pardon of beloved Texas Congressman Henry Cuellar and Imelda. Henry, I don't know you, but you can sleep well tonight. Your nightmare is finally over." Last year, the Cuellar couple were charged with accepting nearly $600,000 in bribes from foreign entities, including an oil company owned by the government of Azerbaijan and a Mexican bank, in a 7-year-long operation. Cuellar has consistently maintained his innocence and that of his wife. Cuellar told Fox News' Brett Baier, "I did speak against the Biden administration about open borders. Absolutely, it was weaponized." Because of the similar experience, he sympathized with President Trump's legal ordeals as a candidate in 2024. He said, "I really felt for him on some of the charges they filed against him. I think it was very unfair. I don't want to wish anybody to go through this type of weaponization." First elected to Congress in 2004, Cuellar is a moderate Democrat. He calls himself a conservative Democrat. And he expressed deep gratitude toward President Trump. He said, "I want to thank President Trump for his tremendous leadership and for taking the time to look at the facts. I thank God for standing with my family and I during this difficult time. This decision clears the air and lets us move forward for South Texas." Venezuela has long been a target of the Trump administration's crackdown on drug trafficking. The administration has recently launched a series of operations against Venezuela, and they deployed U.S. military forces to the southern Caribbean region, with tensions continuing to escalate. Ex-user Richard Full posted a tweet stating that Venezuelan officials have announced CIA agents and U.S. Special Forces have officially entered Venezuela to prepare for an operation to capture Maduro, emphasizing that tensions between the U.S. and Venezuela have reached their most severe level to date. Ex-user Aurora also tweeted that the U.S. Navy's aircraft carrier, U.S. Gerald R. Ford, arrived at St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands on December 1st for a port visit. This is less than 900 kilometers from Venezuela in the southern Caribbean Sea. Currently, there are 11 U.S. warships conducting a blockade over the coast of Venezuela. Corresponding to these unofficial reports, President Trump and Venezuela's Maduro spoke by phone on November 21st. According to Reuters, Maduro told President Trump during the call that he was willing to leave Venezuela, provided he and his family members had full legal amnesty, including the removal of all U.S. sanctions and the end of a flagship case that he faces before the International Criminal Court. He also requested removal of sanctions for over 100 Venezuelan government officials, many of who are accused by the U.S. of human rights abuses, drug trafficking, or corruption. In such case, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez would run an interim government ahead of new elections. Reuters also reported that President Trump rejected most of his requests on the call, but he told Maduro that he had a week to leave Venezuela for the destination of his choice alongside his family members. But that safe passage expired on Friday, prompting President Trump to declare on Saturday that Venezuela's airspace was closed. And on Saturday, President Trump once again signaled the possibility of expanded operations, telling U.S. troops that U.S. forces may soon conduct ground actions inside Venezuela. So far, the United States has carried out at least 21 lethal strikes on suspected drug smuggling vessels since September, and they killed more than 80 alleged drug traffickers aboard those boats that U.S. officials say were ferrying narcotics northward. Speaking to reporters on Air Force One on November 30th, President Trump confirmed that he had spoken to Maduro but declined to offer further details. President Trump said later, "I wouldn't say it went well or badly. It was a phone call." The White House also declined to elaborate further, and Venezuela's information ministry also kept silent. Maduro acknowledged the phone conversation yesterday. He described the call as respectful and cordial. Maduro said during a television address, if this call means steps are being taken toward a respectful dialogue between our countries, then dialogue is welcome, diplomacy is welcome. Since assuming power in 2013, Maduro's legitimacy has been questioned by the United States and other Western nations. Last year, he declared victory in the election, but opposition groups and independent observers pointed out that former diplomat Edmundo Gonzalez Urrutia had actually won by a landslide. A Washington-based source who was briefed on the Trump administration's internal discussions earlier this week did not rule out the possibility of a negotiated exit for Maduro, but stressed that significant disagreements remained and important details were still unresolved. While these behind-the-scenes negotiations played out, another unexpected development signaled a shift in the U.S.-Venezuela relations. Previously, migrant flights that were conducted by ICE were twice every week. The flights returned Venezuelans who had entered the U.S. illegally or had their humanitarian parole or temporary protected status revoked. Then, over the weekend, the Venezuelan government said that the comments by President Trump saying that the Venezuelan airspace should be considered closed resulted in a sudden halt to those flights. But on Tuesday, Venezuelan authorities approved a migrant repatriation flight from the United States. Venezuelan Transportation Ministry said in a statement, the Aeronautics Authority of Venezuela has received a request from the government of the United States to restart migrant repatriation flights from that country to Venezuela. And now that we've gone to this point, why would President Trump seek to overthrow Maduro? Joshua Phillips is a senior investigative reporter and host of Crossroads at the Epoch Times. He argues that this isn't only about drugs or oil, but part of a larger plan. A plan that is tied to Venezuela's 2018 election, along with its near war with Guyana and the growing presence of China, Russia, and Iran inside the country. Joshua Phillips believes that to understand how Venezuela reached this point, we need to look back. Once one of Latin America's strongest democracies and fastest growing economies, Venezuela then collapsed under the socialist policies of Hugo Chavez and his extreme state control. Chavez pulled Venezuela closer to Cuba and other communist countries, and he distanced Venezuela from the United States. Then he chose Maduro to keep that plan alive. Joshua Phillips explains that by the time Maduro took power in 2013, living standards in Venezuela had crashed by 74%. Meanwhile, Venezuela fell deeper under Cuban, Russian, Iranian, and CCP influence. And this is when Juan Guaido came into the picture. During the 2018 election, Guaido ran his presidential campaign with a promise to break the influence of Cuba and to take the country back. But in the 2018 election, Maduro declared himself the winner, while even the Biden administration later on recognized Guaido as the winner. Yet what Guaido was looking to do couldn't be done so easily. According to Joshua Phillips, this is because ending Cuban influence would also affect the influences of others such as Russia, Iran, and the Chinese Communist Party. So it's clear that the U.S. operations aren't just about oil or cartels. They're about reversing decades of communist influence and bringing back the U.S. influence in Latin America. But how deep does this power shift really go, and who's fighting for control of Latin America? We'll continue to bring you the details as the drama in Venezuela continues to unfold. Last week, fires broke out in 8 high-rise residential buildings in Hong Kong, resulting in the death of at least 159 people. This was the worst fire in Hong Kong in terms of casualties since 1948. A 71-year-old man stood before a burning building with his arms raised in despair as he cried out in anguish. His expression and silhouette, captured by a Reuters photographer, spread widely and shocked the world. He was shouting, "My wife is still inside." This became the most iconic image of the disaster. 1 week after the tragedy, the man's wife remains missing. She is one of 30 people who are unaccounted for. Photographer Tyrone Siu, who took the photo, said, "It's a picture that tells you everything straight away. No matter where you are from in the world, you can feel what Mr. Wong is feeling, the helplessness and the pain." The cause of this fire remains shrouded in mystery, and the truth is yet to be uncovered. The buildings that caught fire are 42 years old. According to the 2021 census, the majority of residents in these buildings are elderly, with a median age of 57, and over 40% are age 65 or older. At the time of the incident, these buildings were undergoing renovation work. The exterior facades were densely covered with bamboo scaffolding and green safety netting. Residents' windows were also tightly covered with white foam boards. Due to the ongoing construction, nearly all residents kept their windows shut to minimize noise and prevent dust from entering their homes. This also meant that many residents were unable to see the thick smoke from the fire burning early on. The initial spark of this disaster was a flame barely a meter high that quietly emerged from the base of a bamboo scaffold on one of the buildings. Yet within 3 hours, the fire alert level had escalated to level 5, just one step below the highest catastrophic level. Level 5 indicates that the fire at the scene is completely out of control and spreading rapidly, accompanied by heavy smoke, intense heat, and a rising number of casualties. So why did the fire spread so rapidly? The government's explanation changed daily. Chinese media blamed bamboo structures for the rapid spread of the fire just one day after the incident. However, this claim was unanimously refuted by Hong Kong residents. The use of bamboo scaffolding in Hong Kong's construction industry is a tradition that has persisted for over a century without causing fire hazards. Bamboo is not easily burned. There's a famous dish in Hong Kong called bamboo barrel rice, where rice is placed in a bamboo barrel and cooked over an open flame. Even then, the bamboo itself does not catch fire. At the scene of the fire, after the blaze was extinguished, the bamboo scaffolding remained standing. In contrast, nearly 90% of the protective netting had been completely burned away. So it's clear that the issue lies with the protective netting. The protective netting on the scaffolding should have been fire resistant, but the flame retardant certification for the netting that was used in this incident was issued by a laboratory in Shandong Province, mainland China, under CNAS accreditation, replacing the traditional standard used in Hong Kong. Therefore, the investigation points to the maintenance contractor using substandard materials, since low-quality materials cost 30 to 50% less than standard materials. However, the Secretary for Security of the Hong Kong government emphasized the day after the disaster that the fire resistance of the protective netting, fire retardant fabric, and plastic sheeting used in the building's maintenance work far exceeded standards. This has further fueled public skepticism. Why did the authorities rush to declare the protective net problem-free? Was it to shield enterprises under the CCP's rule? Later, under mounting pressure, the Hong Kong government admitted that none of these safety nets met fire retardant standards. So, how could the government have approved such substandard materials as safety nets in the first place? Moreover, the contractor who was responsible for the building's maintenance work, Hong Yi Construction, has been exposed for its involvement in multiple incidents of violating construction safety regulations. Between 2022 and 2025, it faced at least 10 charges for breaching the Occupational Safety and Health Ordinance. So, how did such a contractor win the bid for this project? Faced with public scrutiny, the Hong Kong government adopted a tactic that is frequently employed by Beijing. When unable to resolve the issue, it targets whoever raised the issue. Of course, this action was also taken at the suggestion of the CCP government. On the fourth day after the disaster, the Beijing-based Hong Kong National Security Office issued a statement declaring that anti-China and pro-Hong Kong chaos activists, along with those with ulterior motives, remain restless and eager to stir trouble. It expressed support for the Hong Kong government to severely punish those who are supposedly exploiting the disaster to create chaos in Hong Kong. Hong Kong's National Security Department arrested 3 individuals on suspicion of incitement, including Miles Kwan, the founder of the Civil Concern Group on Fires, and a university student who was demanding an independent investigation, along with a former Hong Kong District Council member, Chung Kam Hong, and a female volunteer. Since Hong Kong's return to the mainland, the issue of mainland-style governance in Hong Kong has consistently drawn media attention, and the recent Hong Kong fires have ignited this debate. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember to leave a comment below the video. This is really helping us to be seen all around the world. The more people who watch Front Page, the more freedom-loving people the world will have. And please hit the like button and hit the notification bell after subscribing. And please share this video with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth.